I've been thinking about something lately that I really need to share with you, and I hope you'll stick with me because this might just change everything you thought you knew about connecting with people. My name is Amelia, and I want to talk to you today not as some relationship guru or expert who has all the answers, but as someone who has watched so many good men, really good men, completely miss the mark when it comes to creating those deep, meaningful connections that actually last. Here's what I've noticed, and it breaks my heart every single time. There are men out there who have everything going for them on paper. They're attractive, they're successful, they walk into a room with confidence, and yet something is missing. They go on dates that seem to go well, they have great conversations, they make people laugh, but then nothing happens. The connection just fizzles out, and they're left wondering what went wrong. And the truth is, it's almost never about what they think it's about. I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. Picture a man who looks like he has it all figured out. He's got the nice car, the great job, he's good looking, he's charming when he needs to be. But when he's with a woman, there's this invisible wall between them that neither of them can quite name. She can't put her finger on why she doesn't feel that spark, and he can't understand why all his efforts seem to lead nowhere. This happens every single day, and it's not because he's doing something terribly wrong. It's because he's missing the subtle things, the quiet moments, the gentle touches of humanity that make someone truly unforgettable. What I'm about to share with you isn't some trick or technique you can just apply like a formula. This is about becoming the kind of person who naturally draws people in, who makes women feel something real and lasting. And the beautiful thing is, none of this requires you to be someone you're not or to put on an act. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about stripping away all the unnecessary noise and getting back to what really matters in human connection. Let me tell you about something that happened to me not too long ago. I was at a coffee shop and I watched this interaction between a man and a woman on what was clearly a first date. They were sitting across from each other and he was doing everything right according to what most dating advice would tell you. He was asking questions, he was making eye contact, he was smiling and laughing at the right moments. But there was something missing. I could see it in her body language. She was polite, she was engaged, but there was no real connection happening. And then I noticed what it was. Every single interaction was transactional. He asked a question, she answered. He responded, she laughed. It was like watching two people go through the motions of what a date should look like, without any of the magic that makes it memorable. Now contrast that with another couple I saw just a week later in the same coffee shop. The difference was like night and day. This man wasn't trying nearly as hard, but the woman across from him was absolutely captivated. And as I paid attention to what he was doing differently, I realized it was all in the tiny details. When he talked to her, he would lean in slightly, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that made it clear she was the only person in the room. When she spoke, he didn't just listen with his ears. You could see he was listening with his entire being. He wasn't thinking about what clever thing to say next. He was genuinely interested in what she was saying, and she could feel it. At one point, she said something funny and reached out to touch his arm as she laughed. Most men would have let that moment pass without thinking twice about it. But this man, he placed his hand gently over hers for just a second, smiled, and then went back to his coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't sexual, it wasn't possessive, it was just human. And I saw her entire demeanor change in that instant. Something shifted, the connection deepened. This is what I mean by the little things that make all the difference. Touch is one of the most powerful forms of communication we have as human beings, and yet so many men either avoid it completely because they're afraid of coming across as inappropriate, or they use it in ways that feel forced and uncomfortable. The key is to understand that touch, when it's given freely without expectation, when it's gentle and respectful and natural, creates a sense of safety and connection that words alone simply cannot achieve. Think about the last time someone touched your shoulder when you were upset, or gave you a hug when you needed it, or just held your hand for a moment. Think about how that made you feel. It's comforting, isn't it? It makes you feel seen and valued and cared for. That's exactly what the right kind of touch does in the early stages of getting to know someone. It breaks down barriers. It communicates warmth and presence. It says, without saying anything at all, that you're someone who pays attention, someone who cares, someone who is right there in the moment with her. But here's where most men get it wrong. They touch with an agenda. They touch because they want something in return. And women can sense that immediately. It makes them uncomfortable because it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a transaction. The touch that creates real connection is the touch that expects nothing. It's the gentle hand on the small of her back as you guide her through a crowded room. It's the brief touch on her arm when you're making a point in conversation. It's holding her hand for just a moment when she shares something vulnerable. These are moments that say you're present, you're attentive, and you respect her completely. Now, let's talk about something else that I see men struggle with all the time, and that's the balance between showing interest and maintaining your own sense of self. There's this idea out there that if you really like someone, you need to constantly be pursuing them, texting them, making plans, proving your interest. And while it's true that you need to show you care, there's a fine line between healthy pursuit and desperate chasing. The men who really understand this are the ones who can be playful and engaging without losing themselves in the process. I want you to think about the difference between someone who is fun to be around because they're genuinely enjoying themselves, and someone who is trying really hard to be fun because they need your approval. The first person is magnetic. They draw you in because their joy is authentic and infectious. The second person is exhausting because you can feel the neediness underneath everything they do. This is why being playful in the right way is so important. It's not about performing or trying to get a certain reaction. It's about creating an atmosphere where both of you can relax and enjoy each other's company. When you can tease her gently about something, when you can laugh together about the absurdity of life, when you can create inside jokes and shared moments of levity, you're building something real. But it only works if you're doing it from a place of genuine enjoyment, not from a place of trying to win her over. The moment you start monitoring her reactions, waiting to see if she laughs at your joke or smiles at your comment, you've lost the magic. You've made it about you and your need for validation, instead of about the shared experience you're creating together. I learned this lesson myself in my own relationships. I used to be the kind of person who would say something funny or interesting and then immediately watch the other person's face to see if they approved. And you know what? It killed the moment every single time. Because instead of being present and enjoying the interaction, I was in my head worrying about whether I was being liked. It wasn't until I learned to let go of that need for constant validation that my relationships started to deepen and become more fulfilling. This brings me to something that I think is maybe the most important thing I can share with you today, and that's the art of truly listening. I know, you've heard this a million times before. Everyone talks about the importance of listening, but I want you to really think about what it means to listen, not just to respond, but to actually hear and understand another person. Most conversations, if we're being honest, are just two people taking turns talking about themselves. Person A says something, and while they're talking, person B is already thinking about what they're going to say next. Then person B talks, and person A is doing the same thing. Nobody is actually listening. Nobody is actually present. And this is especially true in the early stages of dating, when everyone is trying to make a good impression and prove how interesting they are. But what if you did something radically different? What if you went into a conversation with the sole intention of understanding the person in front of you? Not to fix their problems, not to share your own similar story, not to offer advice unless they specifically ask for it, but just to understand who they are and how they see the world. This kind of listening is so rare, so precious, that when someone experiences it, they never forget the person who gave them that gift. I remember a date I went on several years ago that I still think about to this day. We went to dinner, and I was going through a difficult time with my family. I didn't plan to talk about it. It wasn't exactly first date conversation material, but somehow it came up naturally. And instead of changing the subject or offering some generic advice, he just listened. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered details I'd mentioned earlier in the conversation. He made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered, like my thoughts and feelings were worth his time and attention. And you know what? That feeling was more attractive than any amount of charm or wit or physical appearance could ever be. It made me feel safe with him. It made me trust him. And that's the foundation of any real connection. When you listen to a woman, really listen, you're telling her that she matters. You're telling her that her thoughts and experiences are valuable. You're creating a space where she can be herself without judgment or expectation. And in a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, that kind of quiet attention is incredibly powerful. Now, I want to talk about something that might seem counterintuitive, but I promise you it's one of the most attractive qualities a person can have, and that's the ability to stay calm when things don't go according to plan. Life is messy. Dates don't always go perfectly. People have bad days. Sometimes she's late or tired or stressed about something that has nothing to do with you. These moments are where your true character shows through. I've seen men completely fall apart when something goes slightly wrong on a date. The restaurant lost their reservation, so they get angry and flustered. She disagrees with something they said, so they get defensive. She's quiet because she had a rough day, and they take it personally and start acting cold. These reactions come from a place of insecurity, from needing everything to be perfect in order to feel okay about themselves. But a man who is truly secure in who he is doesn't let external circumstances dictate his internal state. When you can stay calm and grounded when things get messy, when you can handle conflict or disappointment with grace and patience, you become a safe harbor in a stormy world. Women are attracted to this kind of stability because it signals emotional maturity and strength. It shows that you're not going to fall apart the moment things get difficult, that you can be relied upon when life throws its inevitable challenges your way. This doesn't mean you become passive or that you don't have emotions. It means you respond rather than react. You take a breath. You consider what's actually happening instead of letting your ego take over. You stay connected to yourself and to the other person even when things are uncomfortable. This is real strength, and it's something that develops over time as you work on knowing yourself and managing your own emotional landscape. And finally, I want to talk about something that might be the hardest thing of all, and that's knowing when to step back. This goes against everything our culture tells us about pursuing what we want and never giving up. But here's the truth. The most attractive thing you can do is know your own worth and refuse to settle for less than you deserve. When you can walk away from a situation that isn't serving you, when you can give someone space without desperately clinging to them, when you can be okay even if a particular relationship doesn't work out, you become exponentially more attractive. This isn't about playing games or using reverse psychology. It's about genuinely having a full life that doesn't revolve around any one person. It's about respecting yourself enough to not chase someone who isn't meeting you halfway. And paradoxically, this is often when people realize what they're about to lose and start moving toward you instead. I've learned this lesson the hard way more times than I'd like to admit. I've been the person who held on too tight, who tried to force something that wasn't working, who was so afraid of losing someone that I lost myself in the process. And I've also been on the receiving end of that kind of desperate energy, and I can tell you it's profoundly unattractive. But when I've encountered people who have their own lives, their own passions, their own sense of purpose, and who are interested in me but not dependent on me, that's when I've felt the most drawn in. The thing is, all of these qualities I've been talking about, the gentle touch, the playful engagement, the deep listening, the calm presence, the self-respect, they're not really about attracting women at all. They're about becoming a fuller, more complete human being. They're about developing the kind of character and presence that naturally draws people to you because you're someone worth knowing. When you work on these things, you're not learning tricks to manipulate someone into liking you. You're becoming the kind of person who enriches the lives of everyone around you. You're developing empathy and emotional intelligence and self-awareness. You're learning to be present and authentic and secure in who you are. And those qualities will serve you in every area of your life, not just in romantic relationships. So here's what I want you to take away from our conversation today. Stop trying so hard to be impressive and start trying to be present. Stop worrying about whether she likes you and start focusing on whether you're being the kind of person you're proud to be. Stop looking for techniques and start developing character. The connections that really matter, the ones that last and deepen and become truly meaningful, they don't come from doing all the right things. They come from being a whole person who has something real to offer. This journey isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. You're going to stumble. You're going to have moments where you fall back into old patterns. You're going to mess up and say the wrong thing or miss an opportunity or let your insecurities get the better of you. And that's okay. That's part of being human. The important thing is that you keep working on yourself, keep learning, keep growing into the person you want to be. And as you do that work, I promise you, things will start to shift. You'll notice that your interactions with people feel different, more authentic, more connected. You'll find that you're not as worried about outcomes because you're enjoying the process. You'll discover that the right people are drawn to you naturally because you're no longer trying to be someone you're not. This is the real secret that nobody talks about. It's not about mastering some set of skills or learning the right things to say. It's about doing the inner work to become someone who is genuinely worth knowing. And when you do that, everything else falls into place.